Patrick Rickards is executive director and CEO of Life After Hate, the nation's leader in violence intervention in the violence intervention community, and the first nonprofit in the United States dedicated to helping individuals disengage from violent hate groups and hateful online spaces. Um, he has quite the resume, you guys. So he has also advised 3 presidential administrations, half a dozen cabinet level agencies, also worked for a U.S. member of Congress, 3 U.S. senators, and the Senate Appropriations Committee. He's the founder of Driving Force Institute for Public Engagement, which is a national effort to transform the teaching and learning of American history and civics through short films, an effort that has 52 million members now. He's a former university vice president and served as the chief communications and strategy officer for the Woodrow Wilson Foundation. He's also an award-winning author of 2 books, and he has been an editor and co-author of other books, y'all. So I'm saying very busy person. He has an undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia, graduate certificates from Stanford and University of Southern Cal. And it says you're currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Southern California. Where do you find the time, Patrick?
I don't know. My wife asked the same questions. I'm exhausted just listening to you, Julie.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm always very happy to have high quality speakers come on, but I was reading through your bio and I was like, wow, okay. You have a lot going on. So why don't we just start off, go ahead, let's just have you, anything else you want to share about your background, about you, how you got involved with Life After Hate. We can start there.
Sure. No, I think you covered a lot of it. I can say, I mean, Life After Hate's existed for about 14 years, and we were created by former violent extremists themselves who decided they got themselves out of the movement and they wanted to help others. I am actually the first executive director who is not a former violent extremist. That is something I cherish. I cherish being entrusted with this organization, but also do it. I do this work because I look at my children. I'm the father of 2 teens of color. And the work that I do is hopefully designed to help make society a little safer for them and people like them.
Well, I appreciate that definitely, as being a mom of 2 or 3 biracial children as well. So I appreciate your work on that. Why don't we just start off with generally, how do you define a hate group or an extremist hate group?
It's a question we get all the time. Particularly people wanting to know what is the difference between extremism and violent extremism. I mean, we are not talking about your Uncle Charlie who says racist things at Sunday dinner every week. We are talking, when you talk about these extremist groups, you're talking about groups that not only preach a hateful ideology, but also preach the need to take action based on that ideology. So those who are looking to commit violent acts, those who are looking to go after people that they deem different, that they deem unworthy, that they deem at fault for where society is or where their lot in life is, if they're targeting people because of their race, because of their gender, because of their sexual preference, because of their religion, because of their country of origin, that tends to be a violent extremist group.
So I think most people would be interested just to know, how does someone get recruited or drawn into these groups? Like, maybe just kind of explain how that happens. And, I assume it's very deliberate by the groups in terms of the strategy, but kind of talk about their strategy, what they're trying to do, and how it is that people can kind of, I don't want to say fall for it, but be kind of drawn in or find interest in that.
I will say these groups are masterful at recruiting, and they are getting better and better by the day. It's one of those things. If we look at, obviously, the internet has made them more effective. COVID made them more effective, and they know exactly what they're looking for. And what becomes interesting is that the majority of people that we come across, they're not recruited into these movements because they already held the ideology. It's not that they were hating the Black community or they were anti-Semitic or they were misogynist. It's, you tend to see a lot of people that suffered trauma in their early childhoods. You tend to see people that believe that they're just not understood. And this is particularly true of teens. They're not understood. They don't fit in. People don't understand them. For me, when I was a teenager, that sort of describes every teenage male. But that's what they look for. Those who are going to be a little bit weak, who are seeking somebody to finally get them, somebody to accept them for who they are. And what you see, as I said, I'm the father of two teens. My son's about to graduate from high school this month. He is one of those teenagers who lives online gaming. And that becomes the perfect example of how this recruitment happens. Because for those who have kids of that age, you've probably heard of platforms like Discord and Twitch. Those are both prime hunting grounds for these extremist groups. And they go after it again, not based on the ideology, but they will prey on that insecurity. They will go in and praise individuals. What a great gamer you are. You're the best Call of Duty player I've ever seen. I can't believe your mother's constantly on you, telling you to get off the computer, telling you game too much. And they begin to suck them in. They play into that insecurity. They build up their confidence. They make it seem like they're the only ones who understand them. And by the time these teens are in too deep, they've begun to distance themselves from their own families. They realize they really have no choice. And when I say that, you have to understand, these groups are not, as I said, not recruiting based on ideology. They're recruiting based on vulnerability. And in order to recruit, they will go to these individuals and make very clear that to belong with them, they have to leave their mothers and fathers behind. They have to leave their siblings, their teachers, their clergy, their friends, everybody. And the extremist group becomes both their parent and priest. And so you begin to self-isolate because you have to in order to stay in the good graces of the group. And then once you're there, you very quickly realize you have to adopt the ideology in order to remain in those good graces. And like anybody else, you start saying things enough times, you might not mean it the first time or the 8th time, but eventually you start believing your own hype. And eventually you realize that the only way for you to stay active, the only way for you to stay engaged is to go all in. And that's where you see those individuals who might move from a harmful ideology into a violent extremist group.
So just out of curiosity, because obviously online, like you said, Twitch, Discord, great way to get like the young male individuals. Are there different methods? Like, is there a way to reach people off social media, offline, maybe the older crowd who's not on Twitch?
There is.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
And I will make very clear. I want to make sure people realize when I talk about Discord and Twitch, women are just as likely to be recruited there as men. We sort of have this preconceived notion. I will say some of the top gamers on Twitch are women, and they become just as vulnerable, if not more so, which is ironic because the one thing I can tell you about every violent extremist group in the United States today is that they are rooted in both anti-Semitism and misogyny. Yet women are prime candidates for recruitment. But yes, I mean, you still see recruitment on other social media channels. I mean, you see it far less on Facebook than you used to. It still happens. You see it far less on X or Twitter than they used to. You're seeing it more on, as I said, on platforms like Discord, but you're seeing it on some rather extreme groups. But you are also seeing it at gaming tournaments. You are seeing it related to music and chat rooms online regarding certain types of music, certain TV shows, certain media. But you will also see it just in terms of word of mouth. There is a credibility that comes to individuals in these groups who are able to recruit others to join the cause. And so, all it takes is knowing one person, and they can try to bring folks in. It really is everywhere. This used to be an issue where, if you were trying to recruit somebody 20 years ago, you were largely doing it through mailing lists for alternative music that was largely available by mail order. It was coming to the United States through Germany. That's not the case anymore. You can find right now, if you have a grievance, there is a hate group in the United States for you. If you are anti-Black, anti-Hispanic, anti-immigrant, anti-undocumented immigrant, anti-Asian, anti-Muslim, anti-government, anti-Semitic, anti-woman, whatever it is, I can find you a group for it. And so they know how to play on that. They know how to find that individual who's going to believe, I can't get into college because somebody's taking my spot. They're going to say, I'm not getting the grades because this teacher's against me because I'm white. They will play into that grievance, and they will recruit however they can.
So it sounds like the through line is vulnerability and grievance. So just similar question. So it's just pretty much the same method, whether it's an older person, younger person, male, female, urban, rural, suburban. Is there any difference in tactics there?
I think, no, I just because of the strength of online recruiting these days, you're seeing that there really isn't much of a difference. Sort of the platforms people are using tend to be different. You will see, older folks are still gravitating toward 4chan and 8chan, and far less to Discord. But it's still happening. You will see as it becomes the same for rural, suburban, or urban. It becomes the same for both men and women. It's really anywhere you can find someone who's willing to speak out. They will troll on, even platforms like Facebook, looking for comments, looking for things that you post. And it doesn't matter if you're 16, 26, or 46. We've become a culture where we post things online because we're trying to get a reaction. And we're realizing these days you have to be more and more outrageous to get that reaction. And so they know to look for that. They know, they see that as somebody who's reaching out, in many ways, reaching out for help. And they take advantage of that. They've, as I said, they've become tremendously adept and know how to manipulate their propaganda in such a way that they can appeal to just about anybody.
You mentioned 4chan and 8chan, and I'm just guessing that not everybody watching here knows what that is. Maybe you could just give a little bit of background.
I think there is an enormous network. 4chan and 8chan are some of those wonderful sites where you can find, think of Reddit for conspiracy theorists. You really see, if people might remember, I think it was back during when Hillary Clinton was running for president, there was the talk that you had these pizza places in Washington, D.C. that were, trying to recruit young people and selling them into slavery. That starts on 4chan. And you really have, it becomes this network where it's relatively unchecked. There's no censorship. And people will post the most outrageous things. And, the beauty of the internet is we can find any website, some website that will validate our own thinking. And 4chan and 8chan allow us to do that. You really want to get in hardcore. You have those individuals who unfortunately are raised in hateful households, have parents who themselves are preaching this ideology. They may never have acted on it, but they're preaching it. And you can find their parents are often now on platforms like Gab and Telegram and those sorts of things. The platforms continue to grow, and what you see, I don't know how many folks on this call are active on places like Facebook and Twitter, but for many of these newer sites, getting banned from Facebook and Twitter becomes your calling card to getting onto the new sites. It moves you to the front of the line in terms of your access, if you can show that Facebook or Twitter or somebody has kicked you off.
Wow. Okay. That's the calling card to get onto the extremist sites. Okay. What are the signs that someone should we should all watch for in our own family and friends to if I guess to suspect they may be going down this rabbit hole or being drawn into one of these hate groups? What are like the signs to watch for?
Well, I think for parents, this becomes particularly concerning because the signs you're looking for are the signs you're looking for in any teenager. You're looking for individuals who are withdrawing. You're looking, for your kids, who are finding no pleasure in life. You're looking for those who, again, who feel, they're disaffected. They don't feel like they fit in. They've isolated themselves. They're spending their time online. They're spending their time in their rooms. They're not engaging in social activities. It's those sorts of things. But I think what you tend to see as they're going further down the path is, you will see that they will start engaging. It's like anything else that those of us with teens have is they'll try to test us. They will say things to see what sort of reaction they get from us as parents. And will push us and see, it's no different than that first time your child decides to say a vulgarity in your presence. Are you going to overreact? Are you going to notice it? Are you going to say anything? It becomes much the same. They're going to test you. And unfortunately, if they don't get the reaction, if they say something, they're hoping to outrage you, they're hoping to get your attention. If they don't get it, they are going to say things that are more and more outrageous. And they're largely going to be encouraged to do that online. It's not coming out of their own heads. They're not creating this themselves. They are seeing things that are being shared that are getting a reaction, and they're going to try to use it to get a reaction from us. And so, it becomes very difficult to know if we're talking about someone just behaving like a typical teenager, like teenagers have for decades, or if you have someone who's headed down the wrong path. It's why it becomes so important that we're paying attention. As I said, my son is a gamer. Every time I get an alert that Castletop is now on Twitch, I log on to Twitch to watch him game. I have zero interest in watching him play video games, trust me. But I do that because I want to see who he's engaging with. I want to see what they're talking about. We know that these platforms have been not just target rich, but have been heavily involved in some very disturbing actions in the United States in recent years. And I just want to know who he's engaging with. I want to know how people are reaching out to him. And it allows me to monitor, but also allows me to have conversations with him after the fact.
So if you see that there's somebody that you care about who is clearly being recruited online by these groups, and you're starting to see the radicalization, what steps would you recommend someone take to try to stop that?
It's a hard line to toe. And I will say that we do a lot of work with family and loved ones, particularly parents, and we have a very active parents group that we provide support to, that, no surprise, is comprised almost entirely of mothers. It's always that difficult challenge for them to want to be supportive and be there for their children without enabling them. And I think that becomes the most difficult piece. You don't want to push them away entirely. You want to make very clear that what they are saying is not the way you raise them, but that you will continue to demonstrate compassion toward them. You will continue to show them understanding, and will be there for them when they need you. And that can be incredibly challenging. Because again, it's just you cannot believe the things that your child is saying. You can't believe the things your child is posting online. You're going to be embarrassed. Somebody in your family saw something that they posted on X. They said something at school that the teachers have called you about. All of that can become very frustrating. But it's really making sure that you're not condemning them, but you are asking questions. So it's not an issue of how could you possibly say this? It's a matter of, help me understand why you've said this. Why do you believe this? And if anything, that can help you understand whether they truly believe it or whether they're just parroting the things that they're saying, that they're hearing rather.
What about being proactive? So lots of teenagers are online gaming. Lots of them are vulnerable, to this happening to them. What, as parents, or even with just loved ones that we know are potentially vulnerable, like what conversations should we be having, giving them warning signs, telling them to watch out for it? Like, how do we kind of proactively try to be a shield from this becoming of interest to them?
I mean, I will often talk to parents, and some of the initial reactions you get is, I should just ban them. They shouldn't be allowed to game online. They shouldn't be allowed to have a Twitch account. They shouldn't be allowed to talk on Discord. I think most of us know that, if you prohibit something, it's just going to make it more and more attractive. It becomes the forbidden fruit. And so it really does become, that discussion. How do you continue to keep those conversations open? It's that encouraging that if they're spending all of their time online gaming, that you are recommending that they really only chat with people that they actually know, that they not share personal information with people that they've never seen before, that they keep their profiles private so that not everybody can monitor what they are doing. But this is a scary world, and I will tell you, I mean, I think people will often point to the Tops grocery store shooting in Buffalo, and will say, oh, if anybody had really paid attention, the shooter had put his manifesto up on Discord, everybody could have known exactly what he was doing. I believe that the young man only had 4 friends on Discord at that moment. Nobody was paying attention to what he was doing. And I think that's part of the issue. I think it's, we have to, I think, always encourage our kids to do some diverse activities. But, with the average 17, 18-year-old, that's not going to happen. And so it really becomes, if you can, taking an interest, asking to understand what they're doing, if you're allowed to, monitoring it from time to time just so you can see it. But it's no different than, when we had littles and you would explain to them, you shouldn't talk to strangers, you shouldn't get into a stranger's car, all those things that used to scare us in the early 80s when I was a kid. It's much the same. I mean, the internet becomes the new stranger's van. And instead of an 8-year-old, you're now going after an 18-year-old. And well, all we can do is continue to educate and continue to remind our children that we love them no matter what they do. We're going to be there to help them. But we do have expectations. We do have things that we believe in that we need to make sure that we're promoting.
How about like the very direct approach? Just I have an adult son now, so I can't practice this, but just the very direct approach of like these groups recruit online. This is what might happen. Like you might see somebody who's coming in and really praising you a lot and like encouraging you to disengage from your parents. Is that I know teenagers tend to ignore their parents no matter what we say to them, but how do you feel about something like that? Is that also appropriate?
I think it's
Or
appropriate. Is it going to be effective? I don't know. It's one of those, again, from the stories that we hear from those that we work with. So many of these individuals have suffered childhood traumas. Most of the people who join these groups have let's just say, a severe challenge when it comes to trust, even of their parents and their families. And so, you always run the risk of somebody thinking you're just trying to control them. But I think it's one of those, you have to keep the lines of communication open. Even if they just sort of blow you off because Mom, you don't understand. It's worth having that. It's worth staying engaged. It's worth showing that you care, no matter what horrible things they may be saying or doing.
so let's go a little further. Maybe you have a family member who is actively a member of one of these groups. And I know there were some people who submitted questions, worried about that. What can family or friends do when somebody is, I guess I would say, a member, for lack of a better term, is fully invested in one of these hate groups?
Well, I think there again, it's one, making sure that you're not further enabling them. And we've had issues with, as I said, we work with a lot of parents, and we've had mothers that in order to not write off their children, are doing just that. They're almost encouraging them to stay involved and active because they don't want to completely discourage them. They don't want to kick them out of the house and those sorts of things. And I'm not suggesting we kick individuals out of the house, but I think the first piece of advice I would offer is just understanding. And I don't mean understanding your kid, understanding your loved one. I mean understanding the situation. It's why we work with so many friends and family. Because they're asking the same questions you're asking, Julie, is what is it can I do? What are the signs I should be looking for? If I see the signs, what am I supposed to do? Because, we work with a lot of folks. We help them disengage from violent extremist groups. We help them reintegrate into civil society. But that can't happen unless they want it to happen. And so that's why working with friends and family becomes so important, because we're providing them the resources and the information and the support to better understand this. And what is unfortunate is often you're talking about individuals who are in a really tough situation. In many ways, when you talk to mental health professionals, a lot of the people that we work with, it's no different than being trapped in an abusive relationship. You have parents that are fearful of their own children. And so, for them, it's one of those, I hate to say it, but often if you have a loved one who's in an extremist group, you can educate yourself as much as you want to. Often what is going to happen, the way you're going to get them out is they're going to have to hit rock bottom. They're going to have to realize that, they're now facing jail time for their actions. They're now unable to find a job. They can't find an apartment. All of those, their girlfriend is leaving them. All of those telltale signs, those become wake-up calls. And they will often worry that there is no coming back from where they are. And that's why that support and that understanding and that compassion just becomes so important. Because if we truly believe that our children are worthy of redemption, that they can put in the work, that they can take accountability for whatever atrocities they've committed, if we believe that they are worthy of that, then that means we have to be there for them. And it means that we have to sometimes take the time to allow them to realize that they need change. We can't force them into it. We can't guilt them into it. We can't, they're no longer little. We can't drag them into the room and force them to work with folks. I wish they could. And I say this as, as an organization, we started off working with those people who themselves realized they needed to get out. We now have I hate saying it this way, a rather robust practice of working with individuals who are mandated to work with us through the courts, either as a way to avoid prison time or as a way to gain release from prison. They have to go through our program. And, very recently, I've now had to allow our organization to work with youth. So we're now working with those between the ages of 16 and 18, which is something we never did before. But we had to do it out of necessity because we were seeing more requests, not just from loved ones and family members, but from the youth themselves. And, what becomes very interesting, and I don't mean to ramble on, but I'll tell you this real quick story. When my staff first came to me and said, we really need to look at working with juveniles, my first instinct was, how do we get consent? Most states, if somebody's under the age of 18, they need parental consent to do just about anything. We selected the age of 16 because in most states, that's the age of consent to get mental health services. You don't need parental consent over 16. But I was concerned, how do we get an individual to do this? I assumed their parents were in large part responsible for the hateful ideology that they were spewing. And the team at Life After Hate had to quickly tell me how wrong I was, that the requests we were getting from our adolescent clients was coming as a result of individuals who were raised in loving, what I would say is fairly progressive households. They went down this path and they were too embarrassed to tell their parents. They were too embarrassed to ask for consent because they realized that their actions and their words were going to greatly embarrass their parents. Those are individuals I want to help each and every day.
Absolutely. So you say you have a program. I'm curious, when someone does come to you and says, I think I've hit rock bottom, I need to get out of this. What are the steps in that process? What do you advise people?
So yeah, it's a fairly, I want to say simple process, but it's not, because the exit process typically takes 18 to 24 months, depending on how long someone has been in the movement. And what we find is it's not a linear process for most people. I wish it were. But what we have a team that's comprised of both social workers who serve as case managers, and individuals who themselves were former extremists who got out, who serve as exit specialists. And the case managers will work with individuals and really come up with a plan for what they need to do. And a key part of that plan is often having to see a mental health professional. As I said, you're talking about individuals who are working through a lot of issues, not just caused by early childhood trauma, but caused by other things in life. And so you need that help as part of this. And they'll walk through the plan in terms of how to help them find a job, how to help them find employment, how to figure out how can they get back into college if they want to get into college. We even do things like helping individuals remove tattoos. We have a resource database that looks across the country at all of these resources. We help, everything we do is online. We will help anybody from any of the 50 states plus the District of Columbia, and we even work with some individuals outside of the United States. So we have resources that can help everybody. And I don't need to get into how horrible our mental health system is and the fact that you have to work with a licensed professional in the state in which you reside. So we have to connect them to somebody in those states. But I think one of the true keys becomes those exit specialists, those individuals who literally have walked in the same Doc Marten boots. And they become so important because they've experienced everything that a client of ours is going to have experienced. And they can often tell very quickly when somebody is, and this is going to shock some people, but they'll begin the process with us, and in many ways they will peacock. They will exaggerate their own experiences to make them look bigger and tougher and more involved. And our experts know that from the get-go. But there is nothing they are going to hear that they haven't heard before. There is nothing they're going to hear that they haven't experienced themselves. I am fortunate to work at a nonprofit organization where about a third of my staff are violent extremists. Most of them have done time. has served time in prison. They are so essential to the process, and they're really, think of them like this is a substance abuse program and they're the sponsors. They're able to really connect in a way that few people are, and are able to demonstrate again that if they put in the work, if they take accountability for what they've done, that there is a second chapter in life that's possible. But only if they're sincere and only if they're willing to put in the work. And our team makes sure that they're putting in that work until they can one day declare themselves to be formers.
Just out of curiosity, I used to be a domestic violence prosecutor, and I know that the most dangerous time for a woman leaving a relationship is when she's getting ready to leave and walk out that door. What is the danger level that people face when they're leaving extremist groups? Is it may be I'm sure there's variations, but just out of curiosity, what?
It is very much the same. And it's always interesting. And when we talk to some of the spouses and girlfriends, is they do feel like they are in that sort of domestic abuse relationship, and they can't get out no matter how much they want to. But I think when you look to the individuals, this, as I said, this is a space that lacks all trust. They don't even trust each other. And so you will see individuals that when they want to change allegiances to a different extremist group, doing so is often like leaving a gang where they have to jump out, and they're under constant threat of being assaulted if they run into the wrong people at the wrong time. When they are looking to exit, it is very much the same. I think that there is this belief within these extremist groups that individuals hold this incredible wealth of knowledge and information that the government, that law enforcement, that Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg desperately want, and they're afraid that somehow they're going to spill all of these secrets. And they really try to promote this sense that if you turn on the group, there is great harm that is going to come to you and is going to come to your loved ones. And if you look at our organization, you go online, you're not going to find a staff list of those who work at Life After Hate. You're not going to find a list of our board of directors. That's intentional. Even if you end up being a client, whether you're a friend and family client or an exiting individual client, the team that you work with, you're only going to know the first names of the people that you work with. That is intentional to protect the safety of my team. I can tell you that there are a fair number of us who, either as a course of this work or for those who have themselves gotten out of extremist groups, there have been prices that have been put on their heads. There are death threats. There's often the worry that they're about to be assaulted, that bad is to happen to them and their families. You have to constantly be aware of that. But what I will say is, I look at that and realize that if we are presenting such a threat to these extremist groups that they have to send me death threats, that means we're effective in the work. If we weren't making a difference, if we weren't helping people get out in a meaningful way, nobody would care.
Right. If you're not, yeah, you're right. If you're not being effective, that means I'm sorry, you're not getting attention, and the other side hating on you, then you are not being effective. Didn't say that very well, but I was reinforcing your point 100%. How much do you think like disinformation and some of these kind of propaganda news sources like Fox and ONN and Newsmax contribute to the problem of like recruitment and radicalization?
Oh, I think it's huge. And I think it's it becomes interesting where if you look at the grand scheme of propaganda and ideologically based information online, Fox is about as mainstream as they come. And in fact, you'll have a lot of people that will discount it, that it's just, it is the government, it is the system telling us what we should think. And people are looking for other outside sources. I mean, what becomes dangerous is we've developed this whole collection of so-called media that we look to validate whatever ideologies, whatever beliefs we want to have, and we're able to find we're able to find it. We're able to find that validation very easily. But nobody fact checks. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. All it takes is somebody with a keyboard in their parents' basement, and all of a sudden it's fact. We don't distinguish between a guy who posts on a blog with a Pulitzer Prize winning newsroom anymore. It's all the same. And so, we're able to see more and more. And I think, what ends up happening is, you see it becomes more and more outrageous because everybody's trying to compete for the same eyeballs. You see things, again, even, you look at websites, as I said, Fox News is mainstream. Even the Daily Caller has become mainstream. You're looking for folks that are pushing it more and more. At one point you had, the Russian news network was growing in proximity. Now, as you mentioned, OAN and others, we find what we want to find. And they've become very, very good at disguising propaganda as legitimate news and information, of making it look like, again, it's no different than you're consuming Pulitzer Prize winning content. We begin to trust only those sites that validate our beliefs. And that becomes even more dangerous.
Right. You said there's always a site that will validate and make you believe that you are not alone in your thoughts. How do people find how many, what hate groups are in their state? How many? I live in Ohio. I know it's a problem. So just what are the sources for that if people are trying to figure that out?
It's funny. I mean, we do some work with Meta. And one of the things we do is we run some redirect campaigns. So when people go onto Facebook or they go onto Instagram and they start searching for online hate groups, or they start searching for hateful terms, it will redirect them to our site. And a lot of people still do that. They will go online and they will start, you'll type in things that you'll have people that will type in the Klan, and it always makes me laugh when I see that as a redirect term, because for all practical purposes, the Klan doesn't exist in the United States. It's at least not a serious extremist group these days compared to a lot of what we see. But you'll have people that will go to things like the Proud Boys, and will go to things like White Lives Matter, things that they see even in the mainstream news, and that becomes a jumping off point, a launching pad for where they're trying to go. It's the same thing as they will go online. You'll see what other groups are following the groups that you're paying attention to. You'll even see it in the chat rooms where people will mention organizations that they're unaware of. I think what worries me is you have a significant number of national groups that we've probably all heard of. You're seeing a growing number of regional groups that we largely don't hear of until they take some violent actions. The ones that worry me the most are the ones that we don't hear about, because that is also intentional. It's the ones we don't hear about that I worry the most about, because it means they're up to something. I always have to laugh because if you pay attention to these things, every so often you'll see a news story in the mainstream media about how the Proud Boys are going to speak at a college campus. And then there's such outrage from the progressive community and from higher education that the university will cancel the speech. This is an intentional tactic that the Proud Boys use. I don't know if they've ever actually spoken on a college campus, but they get plenty of media coverage for now all of a sudden being persecuted because their political views did not match with the liberals on college campuses today. It's exactly what they're looking for. And that then drives people to go look for them. And I think we see that particularly in the last few months when we look at the unrest on college campuses. You have people that are upset about what they're seeing, whether it's parents who are paying $85,000 a year and their kids are too afraid to go onto the campus to get educated, or whether it's individuals who feel that these protests are disrupting their day or making their commute longer. There are all sorts of reasons. And so we look for those that are in opposition. But so much of what they do, it's not just the propaganda, but it becomes stagecraft, if you will. It's looking for the attention, and it's these groups are great at finding it in so many different ways. I mean, you look. Last year, you saw so many of these groups, again, the Proud Boys being the champions of this, who are looking to shut down drag shows because somehow that was a threat. So they were threatening great violence. I know in my state of South Carolina, as well as in North Carolina, they were opening fire with their assault weapons on power stations in hopes of closing down drag brunches. That again, it's okay, you shut down a Sunday brunch. Some people are going to be disappointed, but it's the news coverage that gets them what they're looking for.
Yeah, and I know you don't want, from what you're saying, obviously you don't go on and search because you're amplifying their messaging and you're amplifying their groups. I know the Southern Poverty Law Center, publishes like a hate report. We actually had them on not long, several months ago about that. So is that like a legitimate source, like maybe where people could look for information?
Southern Poverty Law Center is your best site. And I'm one of those. I mean, I search these terms all the time myself. I just go online and I know it does all sorts of weird things to my algorithms, and I can see it in things that pop up online when I'm looking for completely innocent things. Southern Poverty Law does a tremendous job, not just of chronicling it, but of declaring each year sort of what are those groups that they now consider domestic terrorists. And some of the groups will surprise you, quite honestly. But they're also very good at letting us know as a community what groups are no longer active. And I think that becomes so important. We don't realize that so many of these groups, when law enforcement starts sniffing around, all of a sudden you'll see a group that no longer exists. We don't appreciate, though, that these groups still exist. They've just, for lack of a better term, rebranded themselves. Those individuals who have avoided law enforcement just set up shop under a different banner and a different name, and continue doing the work. And Southern Poverty is particularly good at chronicling this and keeping us all up to date.
Okay, that's good to know. One last question, and then we'll kick it over to Julie to see what questions have been dropped in the chat. If you guys do have questions, please feel free to drop those now. So you mentioned the shutting down the drag brunches, and that was what I was going to get to. So we have seen a lot of that with like neo-Nazis standing outside drag brunches. I live in Ohio. We even had like a Nazi parade through a suburban neighborhood. If you are a person who is attending an event like that in terms of like going into the drag brunch and you've run into this kind of a hate group outside, and people yelling at you, saying things like, what's the best approach to keep yourself safe in that situation?
I think the best approach is non-engagement. I don't think it's to avoid things. I think you just don't want to confront. And that can become challenging. I think for some of us, many of us, including myself, when you see injustice or you see wrong, you want to confront it. You want to call them out. You want to understand why. How could they possibly do this? How could they possibly believe the hate that they are spewing? You want to avoid that because you don't know what's going on. You don't want to be confronted like that. I will tell you, I mean, I've given speeches where the hosts have had to have paid security because I knew that there were going to be hate groups that were protesting outside. And that's fine. I think it's one of those things. We have to recognize that when you have these groups that are gathering, and we could get into a whole discussion as to why drag shows and drag brunches are so offensive to the violent far right, because there are reasons. But at the end of the day, we have to recognize that we all have a right to freedom of speech. We all have a right to freedom of assembly. It's guaranteed to everybody. And quite frankly, I'd rather know somebody's phobias and somebody's hate than have to guess it. But I think what becomes important, whether they're protesting that or they're picketing outside the governor's mansion, or they're trying to firebomb a church, is we need to make sure that everybody realizes that freedom of speech does not mean freedom from accountability. We all have the right to say what we want to say and to believe what we want to believe. We don't have the right for that to physically manifest itself into violence or harm against others. And we all have to realize that if we are willing to exercise those First Amendment rights, it can harm us. It can be detrimental to us and our lives and our futures. And I think that is an important lesson that we all benefit from.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to bring Julie up. I know there were some questions in the chat because I was kind of trying to monitor them.
First one, I know you touched on this a bit about things that you could say, but what did you tell your own children? How do you share with them how to identify these recruiters or somebody put /groomers that are, in these games that they're playing?
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those. As I said, I will regularly check in with my son to ask him about who's talking to him online. And he tends to be very good because, quite frankly, the only thing he wants to talk about is the game. He has no interest in talking about himself or anything else. But I try to be a supportive father. I've taken my son to a number of video game tournaments. For those who have not been there, imagine spending 3 days in a college gym watching professional gamers play Call of Duty on a giant screen. That's what I do because I love my kids. And I can tell you, having been at those events, I can see those recruiters in the space. You're talking about a room full of largely 20-something young men, very few women in that audience. And you can see individuals that they know what to look for. And it's just making sure that my son is aware and making sure that I know who his online friends are. It's not just a matter of understanding who's that friend who may come over on a Saturday to play games in his room, but it's also a matter of knowing who is it he's talking to online. And I'm not embarrassed to say, as I said, I follow him, I follow his gaming on Twitch, and I'm not embarrassed to check who's following him. And to see what new followers he has, and quite frankly, to check out what they're all about too. I think I do it out of love, and if he's going to resent it at some point, that's fine. But we've been able to have enough open conversations that he knows I'm doing it from a place of love, not that I don't trust him.
Mhm. Mhm. So someone asked, why are non-extremist people frozen and they stay silent? How can people denounce the hate?
That's a great question. And I think one of the issues is we fear confrontation. I know that sounds silly in society when it seems like all we do is confront everything these days. We fear confrontation, particularly against those who aren't necessarily playing from the same deck of facts that we may be. It becomes very challenging to have those discussions with someone who just cannot see what truths may be out there, or have found their own truth, and there's no way you're going to dissuade them. We fear that. We're worried about that. I think it's one of those. But we also, I think, part of the issue is we're unwilling to acknowledge that the problem is as significant as it is today. We have seen a steady rise in violent extremist acts and crimes over the last decade. It has continued to rise. For those, I think I saw a question come up earlier about anti-Semitism, for instance. We've seen almost a 400% increase in anti-Semitic acts since October in this country. And we are afraid to respond. I think we saw this. You saw this in terms of individuals who weren't necessarily sure, could they be publicly supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, or was that going to alienate 50% of their friends? You see that now in terms of college campuses and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. If I stand up and it doesn't involve me, what is going to happen? I think the simple truth is this is something that's part of our lives. I think we're afraid to call it what it is, which is domestic terrorism, because terrorism has a very specific meaning in this country post 9/11. But we're also afraid to call it out sometimes, because we realize that when this harmful ideology we're talking about is an ideology that may be held by about a third of our country. It's one of those. It is ideology that's going to be held by some of the kids, some of the teachers that our kids have. It's ideology that's probably being held by some of the people we went to high school with. It's ideology that's probably being held by people who go to church with us or people who work with us. And because it's personal, it's much harder for us to condemn and speak out because we don't want to be alone on the island. And I think it's one of those that human nature is we never want to be the first, but we don't want to be the last. And until you see more people who are willing to speak out, until you see more people who are willing to take a stand, it becomes harder and harder. There's a great story, Julie, that I always love telling. Again, my state is South Carolina. You can't tell it from my accent because I'm a Jersey guy, but I live in South Carolina. But a few years back, after the shootings at the church, at the AME church in Charleston, there was the movement to remove the stars and bars from our state capitol, and to finally take the Confederate flag down for good. And the organizers had purposely found this incredibly brave young woman, a Black woman, who was going to scale the flagpole and take the flag down for the final time. And the state's response is they had the state troopers that were prepared to deal with her. And what they intended to do is they were going to tase the flagpole. It would send an electric charge all the way up to the top. She would fall, problem solved. Nobody was going to take down our flag. Yeah, I see the look on your face, Julie. That never happened. And the reason why it didn't happen is because there was someone who looked like me. There was a middle-aged white guy who, as the state police approached, he put his hand on the flagpole. And the police realized that if they went through with their plan, they were also going to tase him. And that was not something that they were prepared to do. And I share that story in that, he's not an ally. I can't say he was an ally. He was a co-conspirator. And at the end of the day, we need far more co-conspirators who are willing to put themselves at risk and are willing to face some of that scorn, face some of that pushback and such in order to stand up and do what's right.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple questions that I'm going to kind of blend together here. Someone had mentioned that we've discussed a lot tonight about the importance of disaffected teens, but what about the adults who are involved in these hate groups? And somebody mentioned family members who follow Fox News, which I know you touched on, and Newsmax, and have become radicalized. What do we do with the grownups?
It really becomes the same. I think it's a matter of providing some of that compassion and support. It's recognizing that many of those individuals who are adults who fall into this, they fall into it because they believe they're not getting what they're due in life. They don't have the jobs they think they should have. They don't have the education they think they should have. They don't have the cars, the houses, even the wives that they believe they're entitled to. And somebody is to blame for that. And so, it's one of those that, it's hard. I think, when you see so much on the news, you continue to see, for decades, we've seen how affirmative action is to blame. You saw, the precursors to some of these hate groups, raising up and attacking welfare and now attacking DEI and those sorts of things. It becomes proper to believe that someone is to blame for your lot in life and it's not you. And so that can be awfully hard to confront. But I think it becomes, you just have to be there for them. I think it's one of those, we will often run individuals who will want to blame somebody. And, it's that perfect example where I'll run into folks who will be sitting there. They have spent years ranting against those damn illegals and how they're stealing all of our jobs. And we all see it online all the time. And in a rare moment of clarity, they will realize they don't know a single person who's lost a job to an undocumented immigrant. Not a single person. Those sorts of things are those breakthroughs that we look for.
I know we're short on time here, but these last couple questions I think are pretty important. Someone said, how and where do you find mental health professionals if there's a shortage?
Very difficult. It is it's not just a matter of finding mental health professionals who are willing to work with this population, but we find they have to know what they're getting into. It's the tryhards and the mean wells are sometimes insufficient because all of a sudden they're dealing with a white supremacist sitting in their office and they're not prepared for it. So we spend a lot of time going through. This is not something that most individuals train for when they are getting their degrees and when they're getting their certifications. And so one of the things we actually do is we provide trainings for mental health professionals, specifically on working with this population, helping them understand what violent far-right extremism 101 is. Because the last thing we want is to introduce individuals to a mental health professional and have them decide 2 or 3 sessions in, they just can't handle working with this person. It is a special person. The people that work in Life After Hate are so strong, incredible people. And we make sure that those that we recommend are the same.
Gotcha. Do you have Life After Hate on college campuses?
We are just starting to do that. It's one of those things. I've been going to college campuses and talking to students, and I think it becomes important that we see it because you do see a subset of the population on college campuses are being radicalized. It's probably the second most concerning population for me personally. The most concerning population are U.S. veterans. We are seeing far too many people that are coming back after honorably serving our country overseas, particularly in the Middle East. that are finding that this country is not welcoming them back the way they expected. They're not necessarily getting what they feel they should be getting after serving our country so honorably. And they are prime targets for recruitment because they come with a skill set. They've been trained to go after violent Islamists already. And they are ideal recruits. And I believe that those who have served our country deserve far better than having that service tarnished by these extremist groups that want them as members. And so that becomes another population that I continue to be concerned with, and that we're launching a new effort to focus on later this year.
So, and this is the final question, how can we beat them at their own game and recruit people into racial and social justice groups? You know, how can we flip the script?
It's an excellent question. It's something that, you know, when I came to Life After Hate, all we were doing was our social services. All we were doing was the one-to-one working with clients. One of the things that we've invested greatly in is public engagement and storytelling. And I think informing becomes the first step in getting to involvement. And I say that, you know, we've done a lot in talking with former extremists, capturing their stories, providing those counter narratives so people understand not just how they fall into these groups, but what did they experience while they were in it, out, and what is life like after they get out. You know, we've also, last year, we launched a new podcast called The Daily Former. And what we do is we talk to extremists every day. You know, and we let them share their stories. We talk about issues, you know, not just in terms of ideology and getting into the movement, but, you know, how do they rebuild healthy relationships? How do they feel after getting out of the movement? You know, do they want to have kids? Or are they worried about that sort of thing? You know, really providing voice in a way that we're not used to telling. You know, I think it's one of those, you know, many of us might remember the movie American History X. And American History X is actually a movie based on one of our founders. It was his personal story. That's the sort of thing society still wants. We want trauma porn. We want those people who have been violent extremists to tell us their absolute worst moments so that we can judge them. None of us want to be judged by our worst day. And so what we try to do is we try to empower individuals not to tell their stories in a way so that we can judge them and feel superior to them, but allow them to own their own narrative and share what they want to share in a way that they're comfortable. And that tends to provide great understanding, not just to those who are looking to exit violent extremism, but it provides great understanding for those who love individuals who are still extremist, despite their ideology.
Okay, Julie, I'm going to kick it back to you. Someone just asked if you'll let folks know how they see the recording.
I just responded. So
okay.
but yes, we are recording. We do put all of our events that we record on our YouTube channel. Our video producer, sometimes she can do it right away. Sometimes she's got a lot on her plate. So within a week or so, it should be up there. If you are looking for it and can't find it, because we have a lot of content on our YouTube channel, you can always message me, Julie, at redwine.blue, and I'm happy to help you find the link. But definitely, so thank you so much, Patrick, for all of this really important information. Just before we close off, where can people find you? Are you online, or where, if they want to connect or follow your work? Oh, did you get muted?
You got muted.
Okay, I'll just let it go for now. Okay, you should be
Sure.
able to.
No, sorry. No, and I appreciate you giving me the time. I appreciated all the interest that folks have. I think it's, you know, when we take such interest, when we put sunshine on these very difficult topics, it puts us in a much better place and allows us to build safer communities for everybody. But I think, you know, in terms of this, you know, you can find us online, you know, lifeafterhate.org. You know, we're constantly putting out new resources. We're always looking for new opportunities. As I said, we provide support groups for parents, for loved ones. We have a special women's support group for women who are caught in violent extremism. We're getting ready to launch one for veterans and those sorts of things. We're constantly looking for new ways to engage. And so I think it's just important that we continue to be aware of these issues and we not become complacent and accept that this has to be our destiny. It doesn't. You know, it may not be that, you know, we're all going to join social justice groups, but we certainly can make sure that that we don't tolerate this sort of a violent and harmful ideology in those people that we care most about.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions tonight and when they signed up. Really appreciate that. And hope everybody has a great evening. And thank you, Patrick.
Thank you all.
See you all soon.